Hey, Dave Hurley here. I'm going to do a fly tying video on a fly that I get a lot of questions about. It's a fly I fish on the flats, primarily throughout the summer season, use it in the spring as well. Um, Various versions of this fly. I'll tie them bigger, smaller. But this is the one I'm going to focus on today is kind of a newer version of the same fly I've been fishing for the last 3 years. I call it the Flats Jordan. It's a fly designed specifically for bowfin and freshwater drum, but I use it for bass and carp as well. The idea is it's one fly that does everything. You can fish it like a streamer. You can fish it on the bottom. You can crawl it. It represents several different types of things out there in black. Anything from a polywog to a bait fish to a goby. Just about anything you could imagine crawling around the bottom of leech. Been tying these hybrid versions recently. The key for this fly is sinkability, hydrodynamics. It's tied in all synthetics, doesn't hold air. It tends to get down for its weight. It gets down quick. It has movement. It has a rattle. It has sound. It has a hook in the back that's articulated that helps with short bites, helps find the softer spots in the fish's mouth when the fish eats, especially for bowfin, which is pretty critical. And then short biting, like when the drum will peck at your fly from behind or eat it and spit it real quick. It's kind of effective there. It has a nice kind of jiggy movement. The dumbbell eyes are way up towards the eye of the hook, or sorry, the eye of the shank, which kind of allows it to kind of do like more of a jiggy headstand, although there's no buoyancy in the tail, so it'll kind of creep and crawl on the bottom, but it does have quite a bit of movement if you do jig it or dance it in front of a bowfin. The colors are mainly not so much for the fish, although chartreuse and black are effective. The colors are primarily so you can see it and track it visually on the bottom in clear water. This comes into play when you are fishing for a drum and you're kind of ticking it along. And the way I like to fish it is I tell people to make like a ticking sort of. You point the rod at the fly, get tight to the line there, and you're just ticking, and you're animating that fly, pulsating it on the bottom, but not moving it far. And that constant vibration, constant rattle, is allowing the drum to track the fly, which they don't rely too much on their sight. For carp, we're dragging and dropping it into the wheelhouse, and they're eating it. We're not animating it so much, but it does represent a food source. Carp have eaten this fly in any color, every color I've tied it in. I've had carp eat it. If I could choose a most effective carp color, it would be black, and so this tie is kind of the best of both worlds. It has that chartreuse visibility with some black in it. So we'll start here. The tail, as you can see, is a spawn polywog tail. I have them in chartreuse. I got them in every color. These are great. And they come, actually I have this half right here, so I just cut it in half, right in the middle. And we're going to tie that onto an Arex universal curved, and it's a size 6. Just using black thread because that's what we're going to end up on the head with a black section. Thread choice doesn't really matter. Really digging this Renzetti, finally upgraded. So we're going to tie this in right at the end of the hook here. Leave a good amount, just another like shank length off the back. And I like to secure with every step pretty much with some Zap-A-Gap. I put a substantial amount on there. It will help with the tail fouling. I think with this one, this particular fly, I'm going to do something different. This has black in the tail. I'm going to tie this whole back hook section in a chartreuse, and I think I'll fade it to a yellow. So there's going to be more chartreuse in this fly. Just a little more visibility, a little more true, like half and half hybrid. So this is a polar fiber brush. Super has good action, good flash, but it's a non-buoyant material. It's a non-buoyant synthetic. The flies, when you put anything in them, hackle, anything natural, zonker, they just want to float. They don't sink quite as fast. And you could add more weight, but all that does is just make casting them more difficult. I like to tie back this first few wraps pretty good to get those fibers really pushing on that tail, and that just helps hold it in place. Not so necessary, but I do like to add some Palmer chenille. For this one, I think I'm going to make it a little more flashy. Sparse 1.5 wraps there. And I vary the flash. And then we're just going to go yellow. Now at some point I'm gonna tie in silly legs, rubber legs, but I want to get at least one more wrap of this yellow in before I do it. I want to get probably about halfway on that shank. So I'll leave that brush there. I won't cut it. And I'm about halfway on the shank now. And I'm gonna use this actual green chartreuse silly leg. I just got one there. I'm gonna half it. And that'll give us 2 legs on each side. So we're gonna just tie it in on my side, and we're gonna wrap it over the shank and tie it in on the other side. Just like that, nice loose wraps, and then tighten those down a little bit. Just like that. We're gonna trim those eventually. But since I have this brush ready to go, we're just gonna continue and finish the tail here. And we're just going to do it sparse. So that's about 1.5, 2 wraps there, all the way to the eye. And I like to wrap it back before I cut it. Use these little clippers here. Save my scissors. So that's the tail section. When I trim the silly legs, I just kind of cut it to about halfway point of the spawn tail. I have to get too crazy about measuring those out. And I still use the dorky tool. Here we go. Zap a gap. All right, that's one half of the fly. Next up is a Spawn 20 millimeter shank. This is kind of small for the rattle that I use, but we make it work. Sometimes they're just difficult to open up, so I use pliers to get that open. Now this fly is going to be hook up like a clouser, and what I want, since I'm going to tie the rattle on the bottom, is I'm going to have the lip of the shank there. That's going to be on the top, which is normally this would be on the bottom. So as you can see that lip, if you can see it at all. Let's see here. But yeah, that's on the top, so that the rattle, when I tie it in there, it's going to be flush to the shank, and there's not going to be any disruption. There might be a little bit from the concave of the eye of the shank because of the length of the rattle, but it's minimized. This is where the Renzetti is real nice with these shanks here, as opposed to the Peak, which was kind of hard. Great vise for the money, but this Renzetti is definitely a nice upgrade. So this will be the black section of the fly. And what I like to do is close the gap. Just minimizes the articulation to a point where it fouls a lot less. And I just put a little bit of Zap-A-Gap on the exposed shank, and I just wrap back over the eye of the shank, pretty good amount, and that just it doesn't wiggle as freely, and that'll ultimately equate in less fouling of the fly, or no fouling of the fly. You're casting it right. Medium dumbbell eyes in lead. And they're actually going to be tied right up at the eye of the shank. Depending on, again, if you're using a rattle or not, you can leave more space. I actually have, there's a type of rattle that I use, a plastic rattle. Don't bother using a glass rattle if that's all you have. That's super, just a waste of time. They'll break in no time. On Amazon, you can buy these plastic rattles. There's ones called Catchfish, and I'll put the link on there. They are by far the best. Just ran out of them. They're just high quality. The little BBs in here, I just cut the little nub off there, by the way. You can kind of hear it. The little BBs in there on the fish catch ones bounce on another BB in the back of the plastic, and it's a little bit louder, a little more substantial. This one's a little thinner, a little cheaper, and it's got a plastic back, cheaply made, and also is a little bit bigger. And as you'll see, that poses a little bit of a problem. So I'm wrapping it in there, and as I'm doing that, I'm not really, there's no easy way to do it. You just gotta start wrapping, and you need to keep correcting it. and you can see the eyes aren't tied down that well. Everything's sort of a little bit loose, but I'm manipulating it to stay in place. And once you get it about where you want it, you just use a little Zap-A-Gap. So you just use a little Zap-A-Gap on the threads, and then I like to wrap over it again and just reinforce it. But that Zap-A-Gap over the threads will just hold it in place so it won't move too much as you wrap over it with the polar chenille. 3/4 inch polar chenille. Now, because the back is tied on the shank, and then this one will be wrapped around the actual rattle, which is way thicker than the shank, you're going to create the illusion of a taper. So that's another reason why the rattle is just effective in the overall design of the fly. So tie that in. I'm going to go back to the eye, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap this a couple times in the back here before I even get to the rattle. I'm going to actually come back with a thread. And I'm going to take these fibers that I have collected right at the eye, and I'm going to push them back. And what that does is create another little barrier to lessen the articulation of the hook. So it just puts a little more pressure on that hook so it won't freely swing as much. It'll swing just enough to give the fly lots of life, but not so much as it will foul. And then since I still have the brush hanging off here, and these brushes are typically longer, but I'm running out of brush, we're just going to do some more sparse wraps now. It's about the middle of the shank, right about there. So it's about 2 wraps. I'm going to come up with a thread here, and I'm going to again lock it down. Come on back, push the fibers back. And the only reason I'm doing this is to tie in silly legs, more silly legs. So we're going to go with 2 silly legs, which is going to end up being 4 on each side, the same chartreuse. One side and over on the other side, just like that. Nothing to it. Now, since I have limited brush, I got one of these tools, one of these hackle pinchers. I'm going to use one of these just so I can use this as effectively as possible here. And I'm just going to finish off the rotation. So we don't have that much more. I'm just going to do one around the back of the eyes of the dumbbell. And then I'm going to do the beginning of what would be a figure 8 around the dumbbell. So in between the eye of the shank and the dumbbells. And then to pinch it, to lock it off, I'm going to start figure 8ing. I already got it wrapped around it, so I'm going to undo that tool. Just going to figure 8 around the eyes here. Might not even need to cut that. We'll see. Yeah, it looks like it was the the perfect amount. So that was easy. Basically, we're done. I'll show you this extra little thing that I do. I'm just going to trim these legs on one side. Looks a little bit longer. So one other thing I like to do, especially if I'm let's actually do this. So okay, I'll make a little bit of a head, and sometimes I'll use different dubbing to kind of tie it all together. So I have this nightmare musky flies, which is pretty long fibers. Normally what I've been doing is just keeping the head black, and so I've been using a little bit of like a black Senyo's laser dub, doing the same method. So I'm breaking it up, rip stacking it, shortening it. And I don't want that much, so I'm gonna actually thin this out just a little bit here. The idea is you're just putting a little mohawk on this, and it's tying in the whole theme of the colors. If I really wanted to make that look great, I'd probably use a different thread. But I don't really care that much about this finish, so I'm just gonna stick with the black thread, and I'll show you what that looks like here in a second. Now the eye's pretty crowded, so one way to whip finish this is you're just gonna go behind the eye, like one half of a figure eight, behind the eye of the dumbbell eye and the eye of the shank. Because if I were just to go around the eye of the shank, which is normally where you whip finish, you just need a little more space to make that effective. But I like the dumbbell eyes. I like the weight of the fly to be right at the tip. Just helps with the jigging sort of motion of the fly. So you can see how that chartreuse or that yellow kind of ties it all together. Still got the black in there, and it's got the really bright tail, so it's got all the visibility, but it's got some black tied in, which can be, it's just cool. It's just a different thing. I mean, they're highly effective in all black. They're highly effective in all chartreuse. This is just a little bit of a hybrid, mixing and matching colors, which is part of the fun. I mean, for me, again, I tie all kinds of flies that have a lot of bells and whistles, and might not be the easiest, quickest thing, but for me it's just fun, and I like the creative expression of fly tying. It's an outlet for me, so I just enjoy that. I enjoy putting a lot into my flies, and if this gets lost first cast, I'll be a little sad, but I'll get over it. What matters is that I'm fishing, and my clients are fishing a fly that I think is pretty cool. So that's it. That's all there is to it. Flats Jordan, bottom bouncing, rattle, hook up, kind of everything all in one. Carp fly, bass fly, drum fly, and super effective. Not a pain in the butt to cast. The medium dumbbell eyes do make a difference, but it gets down. It gets down relatively quick. I mean, it doesn't sink like a rock, but it does do a good job of having the balance. All right, thanks very much. Appreciate it.